What's going on, Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides OP Pick or Ban, now on patch 10.25. These are the champions that are a bit overtuned for one reason or another, so they have the power to affect your games more than they otherwise should. In light of that, you'll be wanting to either deny their existence altogether or secure them for your own team. But before we begin, today's question of the day is, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Usually these things are going to be league related, but today we want to hear about you, so let us know in the comments below. Personally, I like peppermint.
Starting things off with our top lane picks, we have Jhin. He's barely affected by the nerfs on this patch, and with bot lane being buffed, his ability to have global presence is even more relevant. Something tells me that Riot needs to think about nerfing the champion himself, as he's been a top tier champ even months before the new item system. Anyway, Jhin is an incredibly strong laner that can actually bully out most other champs in the game. Few matchups he doesn't win are usually farm lanes, which he's fine with since he actually scales really nicely as a split pusher. All of Jhin's damage comes from his Q, so make sure that you're trading around that. While Jhin as a champ is super good at itemizing against AD laners, the percentage-based damage that his Q deals also makes him great at shredding through tanks. Generally, you want to force a fight every time you can by using your E to taunt in, and then Q for quick 3 auto trade. Once your sword arrives, pop W to dodge a lot of the return damage. Remember to make sure your sword passes through the enemy for that huge chunk of bonus damage and auto attack speed. After you get off the 3 autos, if your opponent has a lot of potential for return damage, just back off. If your opponent lacks damage, or you're just ahead, feel free to chase them down the lane. Again, trying to pull your Q through them for the damage and slowing effect. One thing about Jhin is that, yes, you're a lane bully, but your only means of going in is also your only escape. Be careful to not get baited, as your kit isn't exactly built for 2v1ing, especially in the early game. Make sure you're trading aggressively only when you have wards down or know that the jungler is on the other side of the map. Once you have your ult, you can extend your lead to the entire Summoner's Rift. Not only can the shield save an ally from that final lethal blow, but being able to actually show up at the fight means you can completely turn it in your team's favor. Early game, this can be nice, but late game, it can be game-winning. Jhin is such a strong split pusher, many champs have trouble holding him 1v1 in the side lane. You can even dive some champs and just straight kill them under their tower. As a result, the enemy is usually forced with one of two decisions. Either respond to you with 2 team members, letting your team win the 4v3 elsewhere, or group as 5 and force plays elsewhere. The latter is ideal for you, as you'll be able to freely farm, take towers, and still join fights with your ult. Regardless of what the enemy does, your plan every game is to get wards in the jungle on the side of the map that you're splitting on, and slowly pressure the enemies into bad rotations so your team can pick up objectives where you have a numbers advantage. Jhin is a great champ for carrying through macro, so if you want to get better at that aspect, I'd highly recommend you stop by ProGuides.com, where our coaches would love to help you with that, or for that matter, any other concept where you might need some work. Our next top laner is Wukong. His biggest strength is his extremely powerful team fighting abilities, but his laning is by no means weak either. His passive makes him super good at dealing with pretty much all the meta AD top laners, and most AP top laners are pretty weak right now, so there aren't too many bad matchups to worry about. That said, there are a couple, with the worst by far being Malphite, so be sure to ban him if you're planning on playing the Monkey King. While it can be tempting to look for hit and run trades with Wukong by using E and Q, then W to stealth away, this is actually incorrect. Your passive stacks up with more hits on enemy champs in combat, and your Q's cooldown goes down with each auto attack, meaning you actually want to trade as long as possible, using your W to dodge something important like Fiora's W, before deciding if you can continue trading or want to back off for cooldowns again. Very early on, your trading is mediocre, but as you get more points in your queue, the extra range makes it extremely easy to punish your opponent. You can even bonk them on the head when they move up to farm without having to use your E's cooldown. Wukong's ult deals both a huge amount of flat damage and damage based on the target's max HP, meaning he melts through both squishy targets and tanks alike, especially once he picks up Black Cleaver. When it comes time to teamfight, your W and E both serve as gap closers, but try to be mindful of when you want to use them. Ideally, you use your E to get into the fight, ult to knock everyone up, and then W to reposition for better backline access, with your clone also serving to disrupt the enemies you were hitting before. And with the build we've recommended, you'll be maxed out in both damage and survivability, thanks to how much healing you get from Ravenous Hydra, the shield from Sterix, and the damage deferral from Death Stance. Basically, doing more damage means living longer in Wukong's case. Looking now to the jungle, much like Shen in the top lane, the tanks in this role won't be affected much by the tiny hit to Bombi Cinder and Sunfire's Aegis. In fact, with Kayn being hit with a direct nerf, they may be even stronger than before. We'll start things off with Nunu. His passive and E give him nearly constant AoE damage for a quick jungle clear, while his Q keeps him pretty much full HP for the entire time. His W gives him some of the most annoying to deal with ganks in the entire game. If your opponents are immobile and find themselves even a bit overextended, rolling in with your giant snowball is often going to result in a kill, even if they have vision. Just remember to not let go early, because once you do, minions can block it. Once you connect with the knockup, E and an auto will proc Phase Rush, allowing you to stay on top of your opponents forever, even if they try to flash out of E's root effect. And if the gank is happening post level 6, your ult serves as a way to be extra sure that they don't wriggle out away from danger. Ganks aside, Nunu's real strength is his ability to secure objectives. You can solo dragons as soon as they start to spawn at the 5-minute mark, and when the enemy team contests a dragon or baron, no smite fight should really be a 50-50, as long as you can time your Q and smite together. As the game goes on, the base damage from your basic abilities will start to fall off, but you're by no means useless in a team fight. For one, your passive gives you a huge attack speed boost to a teammate, usually your AD carry. 2, you want to tag as many enemies as you can with your E before the effect ends to root as many of them as you can. 3, your ult still does insane damage. Even as full tank Nunu, a fully charged Absolute Zero can one-shot squishy champs. You can also look for some cheese ults by sitting in a bush as your opponents come to face check for vision. A 5-stack of enemies walking blindly into a fully charged Nunu ult is basically a guaranteed ace, as long as your allies are nearby enough to clean up. Our second pick in the jungle is, surprise surprise, also a tank. With AD carries being a bit stronger this patch, Rammus is even better than before. Mechanically, he's one of the simplest champs in League of Legends. Almost all of your gameplay is going to come from making the right decision at the right time. Your Q is how you pull off ganks, so in general, don't use it to damage jungle camps. Sometimes you'll see a potential for a kill right after clearing a jungle camp, and you don't want to miss that opportunity just because you don't have access to your only mobility for 10 seconds. Instead, you'll pretty much just use your W and E for clearing out camps. Again, Rammus is simple, so there's not much to explain here. But your clear is still relatively healthy, but you don't clear single target camps fast enough to be a power farmer. Instead, focus on pulling off ganks. If one of your laners pulls the wave to their side of the lane, it's extremely easy to roll in and taunt the enemy for a free kill. And if that ally can maintain a freeze in the same spot, you're in luck. Just keep rolling in again and again. Once it hits the mid to late game, your job is to make picks. Rammus doesn't have some insane AoE wombo combo potential like many other tanks. So in a 5v5 setting, use his Powerball into a point and click taunt onto a single target to just force the engage. While you can really start off by making a pick on anyone, you're gonna look for an auto attacker if possible, ideally the enemy AD carry. If they have enough attack speed, they may even kill themselves on your W and Thornmail. Aside from the one target that you single out, your ult also provides some annoying disruption to the enemy team. 1 or 2 ticks isn't too bad, but anyone that's stuck in it for a few seconds will eventually have their movement speed slowed to a crawl, making it so hard to avoid incoming skill shots or escape your next taunt once it's off cooldown. Before we move on to the mid lane, I just want to take a moment to mention that we have a new channel dedicated entirely to Wild Rift, so if you're going to be playing any of that, make sure to check it out so you can be up to date on the mobile version of the game we all know and love. Anyway, let's get on to the mid lane. Even with some nerfs to their core items a few patches ago, the same 2 champs have continued to dominate mid lane due to their synergy with the same bursty build. Riot has stated that they'll be taking another balance pass aimed at reeling in burst damage on patch 11.1, but this is 10.25, so these champs will continue their reign a bit longer. First up, we have Fizz. He synergizes insanely well with Night Harvester, as the upfront burst pairs perfectly with his Q and W, while the ability haste mythic passive lets him pole vault his way out of danger over and over. Once you finish the core of Night Harvester, Sork Shoes, and Lichbane, you can nearly one-shot squishy targets even without your ultimate. It can be really tempting to use E to engage on your opponent if they overextend on your side of the lane, but be careful about being baited into a waiting enemy jungler. Instead, it's better to play a bit passive, focusing on farming. All you really want to do is get your ult, then you can start looking for some real aggression. Even without resetting for items, hitting a max range Shark almost guarantees a one-shot on most mid laners. Until that point, use your W to secure last hits, and if your opponent looks for aggression, back off and pull the wave to your side. Remember, your E can be used to dodge crucial abilities, so don't just spam it when farming. You'll regret not having it if the enemy jungler shows up. Once you get the ball rolling, if your opponent plays too safe under their tower, don't be too shy to roam to top or bottom. Since his E makes him untargetable, it's great for pulling off dives. Just make sure you get some decent deep wards in the enemy jungle when you roam. That way, you know they won't be coming to assist their doomed teammates. Outside of lane phase, use vision control to make picks from Fog of War. This will keep your snowball rolling while keeping whoever you're bullying from farming their way back into the game. When it comes to team fighting, your cooldowns are short enough that you can ult, jump in to burst down the target you hit, assuming it's not a tank, and then use Zhonya's to wait out your cooldowns before, you guessed it, jumping back to safety. The next mid laner, Ekko, is doing good for pretty much the exact same reason as Fizz. Night Harvester and Lichbane synergize super well with his E, and if you fully stack Mejai's, that alone can practically one-shot squishier champs, especially under-leveled AD carries and enchanters. For laning, Ekko is as simple as ever. You'll be spamming your Q to clear out waves, and using the lane priority to get down vision, clear enemy wards, or look for a free reset. A lot of Ekko players try to use their shoving ability as a roam timer, but that's actually a mistake. You want to stay in your lane as much as possible, taking farm and plates until you hit your 2-item plus boots core set of items. At this point, your one-shotting ability turns on, and you're able to look for kills every time your ult is available. When it comes to team fighting, you're mostly going to be doing some hit and runs, using your EQ and an auto attack to proc passive, then running away while you wait for your cooldowns to come back up. While most assassins generally bring their burst and nothing else, Ekko's W has some huge playmaking potential. It's not too common, but hitting a multi-target stun can be insane in pushing a fight into your team's favor. When there's no objective to fight over, Ekko is more than capable as a side laner too. When he's ahead, he can 1v1 most champs, and can even dive under tower against squishier targets. And if he ends up unattended, he can take a tower in seconds with his Lichbane. Something to take note of, our build here doesn't use Zhonya's, as we recommend picking up Mejai Soulstealer instead. This is because if you play Ekko well enough, you shouldn't really need Zhonya's most of the time. In fact, learning to maintain your Mejai stacks can even make you a better player, as you'll have to use your ult to survive instead of always having the crutch of the Zhonya's. There are of course certainly exceptions, games where the enemy comp requires you to pick up Hourglass, but in general, we recommend against it. If you have trouble staying alive and keeping your Mejai stacks, make sure to hit up our top tier coaches at ProGuides.com. They can teach you how to maximize your kills while minimizing deaths so you can carry like a challenger. Now for the bot lane. AD carries have had it rough since the start of preseason, aside from a couple picks. Now they're finally getting some love, with many small spot buffs to bring up their early and mid-game power. One of the champs that hasn't been suffering is Jhin. And even though the shield on Eclipse has been decreased for ranged champs, he's still going to remain a top dog in his role. Historically, Jhin has either built lethality for an early game snowball into a strong mid game, or built crit for a massive 3-item spike. The preseason build combines both, transitioning from an early lethality start into a mid and late game crit build, making it so Jhin just doesn't have a weak point at all. And with the buffs to crit items on this patch, he's better than ever. Oh, and speaking of his build, I know our build says to get Lord Dominic's last, but you want to pick up the last whisper part of the item right after the collector and just sit on it until you get the rest of your items. In lane, Jhin's Q helps him push waves and has the bonus of doing some pretty huge damage if it kills minions and then bounces onto an enemy champ. Your W gives you some super long range catch potential, but ideally you'll use it to follow up on an already CC target that your ally locks up. A lot of Jhin players actually don't take traps until later in the game, but we recommend you take it at level 4. For one, it helps establish bush control in lane, and as you get higher in ranked, that becomes more and more significant for controlling the lane itself. 2, it can do some pretty big damage in trades. If you or your ally can CC an enemy that steps on a trap, it actually does a pretty big chunk of damage. In addition to its strength in the 2v2, the trap can spot out and slow an incoming jungler, saving you from using sums, or worse, dying. For trading early on, you'll want to keep it pretty short. Jhin isn't the best at extended trades, so you'll generally want to take burst trades around your 4th shot and then back off immediately after. As you start to pick up items, you can take longer trades, and eventually, you'll have the ability to just 100-0 opponents in an all-in. Once you get your ult, a lot of possibilities open. If you take a good trade in lane, you can back up and ult to finish off the retreating opponent. If your jungler comes to gank, you can set up with the massive slow from your ultimate. Outside of laning, the same also applies. If your team is in position, opening up with ult can lead to a free pick on an out-of-place opponent. Sometimes you're either too far, or it's just too dangerous to enter the fray, so ulting gives you a nice way to participate from a safe distance. For the first time in quite a while, Kai'Sa is actually making our list of OPs, and it's not with the AP build that has been standard for so long. In fact, this build doesn't even include a Guinsoo's for the on-hit passive damage. This is good old-fashioned hyper carry crit Kai'Sa. You'll notice the runes aren't the standard either. We actually recommend a press the attack page. You won't have the instant burst of Hail of Blades, but this gives a huge burst to your extended fighting, especially when you consider that it increases the damage that your support does too. And in teamfights, that extra damage extends to everybody. Even without AP, Kai'Sa's passive serves as a pretty strong execute, which gives you exceptionally strong extended trades, especially when paired with a high damage CC and support like Leona or Maokai. And since it's magic damage, it gives you a bit of a mixed damage profile even with your fully AD build. Your Q helps give you pushing power, with the execute helping to pick up CS a bit easier. It's also a significant part of your damage trades, even more so once you get it evolved. When you're using it to fight your lane opponent, try to position so that it targets the champions only, so the missiles aren't being wasted on minions. W provides a massive burst of damage in your trades, but due to its cast time, somewhat slow travel speed, and the fact that minions can block it, it can be pretty hard to land. You'll want to either use it when you're in your opponent's face, where they won't be able to dodge it, or if your support has CC, you'll want to throw it out once the enemy is locked down. E's burst of movement speed can be useful for dodging abilities, and with the attack speed providing a nice bit of damage when you're looking to fight your enemies. The auto attack lockout can actually be detrimental if you face plant into the enemy, so be careful if you're new to Kai'Sa and don't realize this part of the ability. Once you get enough attack speed to evolve this ability, the auto attack lockout feels a lot less detrimental, as the stealth you pick up can be huge in evading threats in teamfights, and also gives a lot of ankle breaking outplay potential. Your ult, on the other hand, brings a lot of decisions to the table. When trading in a 2v2 situation bot, it can be used to chase for more damage, avoid an incoming skill shot, or just ult towards the safety of your tower. In teamfights, there are more options, as it can also be used to reposition to a different side of the fight to continue melting the front line. Or you can just deep dive with your allies, like Avai or Hecarim, jumping into the enemy backline. Just look for them landing their CC and go to town. You're practically an assassin at that point. Knowing when and where to ult with Kai'Sa in teamfights can make or break your ability to win games in the later stages. So if you're struggling with understanding that fully, I definitely recommend you hit up one of our coaches at ProGuides.com. They'd be happy to explain how to push your limits to get off as much damage as possible while avoiding flying into a potentially deadly spot. Finishing things off with supports, we'll first be looking at Maokai. While Imperial Mandate has lost some of its upfront damage, the total damage when an ally hits the target is actually higher. So less damage on saplings, but more damage when you go for an all-in. For that reason, we recommend Aftershock over Comet this time, which would be a more poke-style keystone. Your passive provides you with a bit of sustain for yourself, so you're not as easily punished for being a melee champ. But it's not super substantial, so try to avoid being harassed for free. While top lane Maokai can walk at his opponents and use Q to trade, in bot lane, you don't really have the luxury of short trades like that. Instead, you'll rely on using your E's to control the bushes. If an enemy walks too close to a sapling in a bush, the damage is huge. Once they're poked down, you can start looking for more aggressive trades, using W to go in and Q to knock the enemies towards either your carry or a nearby sapling in a bush. Even early game, a full combo can do more than a target's HP, so if you have a high damage AD carry and they're paying attention, this should be a free kill. Once out of laning phase, you have two major roles. For one, your flash W can be a way to make an instant pick or start a fight. You really can't mess up this engage, so if a priority target oversteps even a bit, you can pull the trigger for an easily won fight. More commonly though, your role will be controlling the area around Baron and Dragon via your saplings. If you sweep out the enemy's vision in the area and then spam all the brushes in the enemy jungle with your saplings, the other team will have to clear those out first before they can reestablish vision in what should now be your territory. And by the time they do clear out a sapling, you'll pretty much have another one waiting to replace it. And since you're building AP, every sapling has the potential to do massive damage to an opponent that doesn't invade it in time. In teamfights, aside from your initial engage, you're going to look to peel. While Aftershock gives you some durability for a few seconds, you aren't building super tanky items, so you'll get melted as soon as it runs off. Your Q can be used to slow in general, but if the enemy team has any champs with dashes and leaps trying to reach your backline, the knockup can stop them in their tracks if you time it well. The last bit to talk about is how to use your ult. While it can be used to start a fight if you flank from a good angle, generally, you'll be using it to fight enemies head on. Instead of using the ult preemptively, where a single enemy frontliner can block it, use it after the fight has already started. Once everyone is engaged and distracted by your teammates, your ult is more likely to hit multiple targets. Rounding out our OPs for this list, we have Janna. She's another strong Imperial Mandate user, so she'll be putting the buff to good use, as long as her AD carry follows up on her W harass with an auto. The build we have recommends Gathering Storm for scaling, but if you're really trying to win lane hard, you can also run Scorch instead. As far as your items go, this is a standard cookie cutter build, but feel free to mix things up with some AP items too. If you can maintain the stacks, slotting Mejais and Rabadons into your last 2 slots will give your shield some crazy scaling, as well as increasing the actual shield health and how much your ult heals by a ton. Q can help shove in waves when you need to, but generally speaking, you'd rather aim it at the enemy champs for that big knockup, opening them up for further harass. Or against more aggressive opponents, you'll look to sit on the ability and use it to disengage when they look to fight you. In team fights, your Q can be huge to prevent engage attempts by champs like Zac and Lee Sin, completely shutting down their chances of killing your carries. W is the core of your proactive support gameplay. If you don't want to be the Janna that every AD carry hates, just hiding behind tower and shielding yourself, be aggressive and harass down the enemy laners with constant W spam. Once you complete Imperial Mandate, the constant W spam really starts to hurt, especially if your carry is doing their part in proccing the mark as well. While your Q and ult will be the majority of your peel, W slow can be pretty crippling later in the game, so it serves as an extra point and click option to stop enemies from reaching your backline. Like all enchanters, Janna has an ability to help her AD carry stay alive longer, but in her case, the shield she gives also gives some AD. And once it's maxed out, and you have some AP build, that AD gives the equivalent to a full damage item. So even if your AD carry isn't in danger of dying, throw your shield on them to give them Ardent's buff and a nice chunk of AD so they can mow down the enemy team. Lastly, Janna's ult may seem simple, but there are a couple things to note. For one, a lot of Janna players, especially in lane, tend to use ult to disengage and immediately run back to turret. Don't be that Janna. Like I talked about earlier, everyone hates KDA Janna players. Instead, when you ult, if you aren't in immediate danger of either being CC'd or one-shot, fully channel your ult for the heal. Many players underestimate the healing it does, even early game, and in many cases, it can be enough to keep your teammates alive to turn a fight in your favor. The other thing is that you can use it just like your Q. If you know there's a champ like Zac or Lee Sin who needs to jump on your backline, you can use your ult to stop their dash mid-air and shove them back, leaving them without a way to reach your precious carries.
And that's going to be it for OP Pick or Ban 10.25 edition. Remember to let us know what your favorite flavor of ice cream is in the comments down below, as long as it's not vanilla. Be sure to check out our website for more in-depth content and guides that were made by your favorite pro players and streamers. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, as always, good luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and wash those hands.